think around 12 graduates from NYU working at HEBS. We have adjunct professors that work at HEBS that are adjuncts here. This must be like the 5th year in a row running a consulting project with the graduate class. I've always enjoyed it. We've got some very interesting and innovative things. So for those who are doing it with HEBS, congratulations. For those who are not doing it with HEBS, well, sorry you're missing out on some great opportunities, but it's a choice you made. Live with it. I'm sure it's going to be excellent, the ones at the Beaufort project. All right, so without further ado, my name is Jason Price. I'm the EVP of HEBS Digital. And the presentation, where's the clicker? Yeah. So this presentation is really structured to be much more of a dialogue. And so I want you to just sort of sit back. Don't take notes. It's just going to, you all got A's from this presentation, so don't sweat it. I think you can consume a presentation much better by just having a relaxed attitude of it all. So it is a consulting class, correct? So, and I work for a consulting firm, a digital marketing strategy / consulting firm. I am by definition a consultant, I guess you could say. So since this is a consulting class, why don't you share with me, what does it mean to be a consultant? Or what does it mean to be a consulting firm? What is this? Can someone share with me? Can you pick them out of a crowd, a consultant out of a crowd? Do they wear blue blazers and white shirts and gray pants and orange socks? I mean, what is a consultant? What makes a consultant?
I'd say a consultant is someone who should be an expert on something, and they are helping other people gain more knowledge. So even someone like at a makeup counter, for instance, could be a consultant for someone who needs makeup. So it could be anyone who has more information than someone else, and they're coming to that person to get that information.
Perfect. Perfect. So in many respects, it's knowledge that they're selling, right? So knowledge is an asset. So you have this asset, it's knowledge, and you're able to leverage it in the form of getting paid for it. That's exactly right. What's your name?
I'm Julie. Hi.
Julie, hi. Nice to meet you. So Julie's exactly right. So a consulting firm is a company that basically specializes in either a vertical or a broad vertical of different industries. And in our particular case at HEBS Digital, we specialize in the hospitality industry, and more specifically in the online channel in hospitality. So our 90 employees in our 3 offices are comprised of not just nerds like me, but also you've got programmers and technologists and strategists. We have account managers, we have people who specialize in analytics, we have people who manage the paid search marketing, we have people who are involved with multi-channel marketing, who understand how to run marketing campaigns through, on CNN and through the Google Display Network and so on. So we've got a lot of expertise, all of it very focused, all of it in-house, on addressing one specific industry. In our case, it's the hospitality industry, which, by the way, is a $600 billion industry. Furthermore, it is an incredibly fragmented industry. So in my opinion, there's no better industry to be in as a consultant than the hospitality industry, because this is where we can really thrive. The knowledge we possess and the knowledge we gain, we can then turn around as a product and sell it at a premium, if you will, to our clients. So we're always innovating as a technology and marketing company, especially in the digital space. It continues to evolve. You've got websites, then you've got something called social media, then you've got something called mobile, and there's meta search marketing. There's all sorts of different business models. There's new apps. So it continues to evolve, and it creates a sort of a hornet's nest of opportunities for us. So to answer the question on the definition I took was from I think it was from dictionary.com, which is, what is a consulting firm? What does it mean? And the answer that they gave was, a consulting firm is a firm of experts providing professional advice to an organization or an individual for a fee. The primary purpose of a consulting firm is to provide access to industry-specific specialists and consultants and subject matter expertise. Okay, so this semester, you guys are all, in essence, functioning as consultants. So one of the best consulting companies on the planet is this company called McKinsey & Company. Who's heard of McKinsey? A few of us. Okay. Yeah. McKinsey. I mean, these guys are top gun. These are the Harvard and MIT and the Stanford grads who go on and work at McKinsey, and many of them graduate from McKinsey and they go on to lead Fortune 500 companies. Very smart, very innovative consulting company. And I admire that company. We will never be like them. We're very focused, very narrow, and very specific. These guys cover many industries. They've been around for a long time. Some of your professors are probably former McKinsey people. I know Professor Latamaki is one. He was my professor too at a different university. But so I've always admired them. And they came out with a new book, and I got to hear them talk about it. And it's called No Ordinary Disruption. And the subtitle is The Four Global Forces Breaking All the Trends. This book was published literally like several months ago. This is hot off the press. And these guys, the authors, these three gentlemen, Dawes, Minyaka, and Wurtzel, these guys have been in the industry for a long time. When I say industry, they've been working in different industries as consultants around the globe, studying and living and breathing the economy that we live in the modern world. Obviously, they're looking at Fortune 500s based in Europe, Fortune 500s based in Asia and in the US. And they're crisscrossing the globe as consultants, working with big companies, addressing their specific issues and needs. So these guys have published a book. And this book is basically the culmination. It's about 120 years worth of work experience, about 30, 40 years each for them. And they said, hey, there are basically where we are today, there are four major disruptions going on in our industry, on the globe. Sorry, not in our industry, in the globe. Four major, I don't even know what words to use, but basically four pillars of what can define where we are and how we've evolved to where we are today. So they've looked at data, and they've looked at their experiences, and they look at trends, they look at what's going on now, they look at technology, they look at healthcare, they looked at energy, they looked at basically every single industry you could think of, and brought all their knowledge together and created this really fascinating book. And the four pillars, I think we could, within like 5 minutes, distill down what those four pillars are. So can anyone shout out just an idea of what these four structural, what do they call them, forces breaking all the trends? Anyone have any idea?
You mentioned energy. Is climate change one of them?
So there are outcomes of these forces that are going on.
Okay.
These are outcomes. Come on in.
I lost my credit card.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And that's what I was texting you. Thank you.
Could it be that we are becoming more of a flat world, that there's no boundaries now, and there's obviously that is taking an effect on many other things? We're not one island, one.
Yeah. So I think maybe you're describing one of the four. They refer to it as flows. Flows of information, flow of people, flow
Right.
of commerce,
Right.
flow of all that. So very good. That's one. What other? There's three more. We'll get to them, but I mean, any others you want to sort of throw out? Yeah.
Maybe technology, like every single day you have new technology shape your different industry in a different way.
Absolutely. So technology is one of those pillars, and those forces, and not just technology as we know technology, like mobile device, although that's incredibly powerful. This is the same energy and power processing that took us to the moon for the first time. But DNA mapping, oil extraction, battery power. It's just enormous amounts of technology used in different ways that have basically forced us to look at the world differently than we even thought 10 to 20 years ago. So we got flows, so sort of this commerce and people and energy and electricity and technology, communication back and forth. Technology as its own is influencing basically every sort of capacity that we look at in life. There's two more. There's two more. What could these other two possibly be?
I guess maybe data transparent. You mean like you can get information easier than before?
That falls under technology. We have the capability with technology to access databases and information that we never had before.
Security.
Security, I think it's sales. I think it's an outcome of the forces.
Okay.
These four forces. All right. So before we go into them any further, let's talk about the assumptions of the world. Because as a consultant, not only do you want to think about these four forces, but more importantly, you know, these four forces are outcome based on assumptions that we see in the world. So these consultants said, hey, guess what? You know, the way we look at the world is all based on assumptions, and we need to get rid of these assumptions. We need to do away with them because they're all basically wrong. And so I want us to reset our intuition. So what we think is true, what we think is fact or given, may not be. And that's what these guys are saying. So in other words, if you consulted with a client, let's use this makeup example, and I walk in and the woman or man starts recommending things to me without first diagnosing me or making some assumptions, you know what, my oil content or pH or what are these kinds of things, then the recommendations that you're making obviously are going to be out of whack because they're not synergistic with what can accommodate me. And so as a consultant, what they're saying is that, these guys are saying is that we need to reset our assumptions before we can actually look at the world the way we see it. So here's a very practical example. In the 1990s and even 2000s, we were hitting peak oil. Do you know what peak oil is? What that means, peak oil? Peak oil means that the amount of oil that we were consuming and extracting out was actually in decline. We have hit the peak of how much oil is left on this planet. And every single barrel we take out and consume, we're not replacing it like there's more reserves. It's actually in decline. So in the next 20 to 30 years, 50 years max, we could actually have exhausted all our oil. And what do you think this could be? What this could mean for all of us? I mean, this would be, potential havoc. So the whole cascade of assumptions that we were framing on what, the world will look like based on hitting peak oil is much different than if, we just tapped into an entirely new reserve and we are 50 years away from even approaching peak oil. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's these assumptions that these guys were identifying that, wait a second, we've taken all these things, all these assumptions to heart and built business models and businesses and recommendations and solutions based on assumptions that, guess what, they actually are not accurate. They need to be reset. So if we just look at it, we have to rethink our assumptions that drive our decisions on such issues as consumption, resources, labor, capital, and competition. That makes sense? We need to, everything we look at as a consultant, we need to rethink. Who really is our competitor? What does it really mean about labor and the expertise? And so, bless you.
Thank you.
Consumption, are we consuming more, are we consuming less? So basically, we need to look at everything that sort of defines who we are as a world, needs to be thought through in a different lens. They also said, so for example, I used the energy peak oil. Cost of capital. I don't know, Professor Mosier, you may remember in the 70s when interest rates were at double digits, 12, 18, 20%. Getting a loan from a bank now is 3%, 2%, so the cost of capital. So when we talked about, making investments in buying, investing in your company or expanding your company, this was unthinkable. It was just too expensive to do this. Now with cost of capital being so low, lower, historically low where we live in today, we need to rethink some of the assumptions on where we should be investing and what types of investments we should be making. Healthcare, from epidemics to eradication. I think thanks to Bill Gates, basically, what is it, the polio or basically the entire eradication of certain diseases that have afflicted, Africa, for example. So we've made enormous strides. No, these were unthinkable, even 10, 20 years ago. Labor. So high unemployment. Right now after 2008, there was enormous unemployment. Right? We have 6 million jobs were lost practically overnight. So we have rebounded quicker than we had ever anticipated. At least that's what the government statistics are. It's completely. I remember after 2008, they said basically it would take about 20 years to get back to the full level and finding jobs for these people. So the economy is so creative and so elastic that it was able to reabsorb and create new jobs and new job classes. That doesn't mean the job is done, but the bottom line is that when things happen, we need to reset our assumptions that, okay, this is the next 20 years. Okay, we've hit peak oil. Okay, we have to find a solution to this epidemic, or there is no solution to this epidemic. So I thought they were very engaged. I thought they were very interesting in how they described these resetting of intuitions. And they said gaining a clear-eyed perspective on how to negotiate the changing landscape will help us prepare to succeed. So that's this mantra that they live by that says, hey, listen, if we can reset our assumptions and look at this world in a different lens, then we'll be better prepared to describe the world of the future. So not live on assumptions, but understand that we live in an evolving and dynamic world, that we're a lot more innovative, and our economy is a lot more elastic, a lot more reboundable, if you will. That we live in a creative society, that technology and other factors are helping us pioneer that. So it's a very interesting book, and I would encourage you all to read it, or at least look at some of the chapters. So I want to read to you a paragraph. I think this might help coalesce some of the things we're talking about. This is from the opening paragraph of the book. It says, our world is in near constant discontinuity. Competitors can rise in almost stealth mode and burst upon the scene. Businesses that were protected by large and deep moats find their defenses are easily breached. Vast new markets are conjured seemingly from nothing. Technology and globalization have accelerated and intensified the natural forces of market competition. And long-term trend lines, once reliably smooth, now resemble a mountain ridge. And 5 years is an eternity. So, they feel that the four forces, which we're going to go into, we already identified two, we'll round out the next two, basically describes the world that we live in and how we should, as consultants, look at the world. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that, put some strategy theory into that world, and then I'm going to show you that where Hebs fits into that world, and then we'll describe Hebs' focus in the consulting that we do, and then we'll just basically wrap up from there. So I've got about 10 more slides. Bear with me. Hope it's not too academic, but I think this consultant approach is very interesting, and I think that this book helps nicely sort of coalesce what the world that as consultants should look at. So moving right along. So the four great disruptive forces. So shifting locus of economic activity to emerging markets. That's one of the four that we missed, one of the two that we missed. And what this means is that the economic growth and even Fortune 500 companies, more of them reside outside of North America and Western Europe. In fact, there was approximately 65% of the Fortune 500 that have moved their headquarters to emerging markets. Emerging markets as in China, as in India, even in Dubai, in Asia. So there's a complete shifting of the focus of where it is. So let me give you some more information here. So the world's largest international companies, Shell, Coca-Cola, IBM, Nestle, Airbus, are all headquartered in developed countries. The concentration of talent, resources, wealth is shifting to those regions. It is also becoming more concentrated in zones known as cities. And in fact, 440 cities currently today comprise the concentration of the majority of the population on this planet. Okay, it's in city centers. And they reference a city in China called Tianjin. And Tianjin is 25 years away from having a bigger GDP than all of Sweden, some $865 billion. This one city. I mean, I know that California, the state of California, has a GDP that's bigger than a lot of countries. And being an American and living in America, that's pretty reassuring that, hey, we've got a very strong economy in this country, we're very dynamic. But there are cities that we never even considered that are going to spring up. So this concentration of talent, of wealth, of resources in city centers, becoming in some respects their own sort of nation state, and all of it burgeoning out of emerging markets, worlds that we never even considered 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So this whole shift in economic growth and attention in these emerging markets is something that we need to just, evaluate as a consultant as we frame the world. If we're looking at, a difficulty in finding talent, which my company faces, a difficulty in retaining employees, and if the wealth and the talent is hovering in Tianjin, how does a company in North America compete with that? We need to get the government involved, we need to get different incentives involved. There's a lot that we are not even asking that we as a consultant would need to consider for a company, on behalf of a company who's trying to sort these questions out. Okay, so does that make sense? Are there any questions regarding this economic shift?
I kind of do. I have a lot of questions. It's interesting that you mentioned that your company has as an issue retaining people. So I see this more as like maybe a problem for America, because if we're if we're looking outside of our country constantly, then A, it's an opportunity to exploit other countries, and then B, our country maybe they're exploiting our people too, because we can't pay our people as much. You know what I mean? That's what I'm kind of seeing in like my field. That's like, so I'm interested from your perspective how it's working
So
for you.
rather than my perspective, the perspective of the authors are saying, hey, this is why we need to get new governmental policies.
Yeah.
We need to look at how we educate our children,
Mhm.
to build it up here rather than have to look outside.
Right.
It's a whole groundswell of I guess I hate to use the word this paradigm
Mhm.
shift that business schools love to use
Yeah.
this phrase, but really I think this is an appropriate use of it, that we have to rethink, that get rid of the assumptions that somehow everyone wants to come to America. Get rid of the assumptions that we'll always be number one.
Yeah.
Get rid of the assumptions that everything's going to be pioneered out of this country or North America. We have to reset these assumptions. And my opinion, just my humble opinion, is that this competitiveness that we're seeing around the world will only make us better. But it requires leadership, it requires fortitude and strength, and what our politicians, I suppose, the guys running for candidate or women coming running for president talk about. All right, so that was number one. So that's a major focus, and I hope that gives you some things to think about. So what's number two? Number two is the acceleration in scope, scale, and economic impact of technology. You had said that, right? What's your name?
Unji.
Unji, okay, fantastic. So you're right on target. And just to illustrate to you what they mean by this, these forces is the acceleration in the scope, scale, and economic impact of technology. For example, we are mapping the DNA code. We have new forms of robotics, technology for mining resources and extraction of energy, getting more out of our resources, even the cost of capital, processing power and greater connectivity, information, transactions. With little capital, you can garner 500 million users in a short period of time and be valued at $19 billion. Who are these guys referring to in that example? What company comes to mind that
Apple.
within, sorry?
Apple? No?
Facebook.
Oh.
No.
Can you say the example?
The company was acquired. It was bought for $19 billion. Its business plan was less than 5 years. The founders are 2 people out of Yahoo. I think under the age of, at least under the age of 35. WhatsApp. WhatsApp was bought by Facebook for $19 billion.
That's no status.
Instagram.
What's that?
Is it?
WhatsApp, what is WhatsApp? Is that you're asking?
Is this like
No,
a
no,
first?
did you say it's
Text
WhatsApp,
message.
or is it like,
No, WhatsApp, the,
Who's on first? What's on second?
WhatsApp, the mobile app, the phone that Facebook purchased. Okay, we're clear on that.
Yeah.
And these guys love using WhatsApp as an example. So, I mean, it's somewhat self-serving to use an example like that over and over again, but I think it speaks loudly to technology and the influence of technology in the world we live in. Okay? So that's the second force. It impacts healthcare, energy, not just texting a friend across the planet. All right, beautiful. Any other comments with that one? You good? Third one is changing global demographics. Simply put, the world's population is getting older. We are not reproducing at the rate that we are dying off. and this affects certain countries greater than others. Russia and China are actually at a negative growth rate. But most of the modern world, most of the world in general, especially, I mean, the population theory is that the more modern and affluent society is, the population does decline, but not to the point that it can't replace. So the replacement cost, if you will, is not keeping up with the replacement itself.
Is
So-
it necessarily a bad thing? Are they saying that's bad?
So
Yeah.
it's not it's a bad, these aren't judgmental,
Yeah.
but this is the world we have to think
Just like
about.
okay.
Yeah, so what forces, so there's forces that affect that, or there's outcomes to that
Okay.
effect. That affects, for example, job skills. What will happen, for example, to pensions, government pensions? The whole theory of a pension is that we pay out because people are paying in. And if the workforce is smaller,
What about the military?
Social Security.
That's another
Social
problem.
military for security purposes, yeah.
Mhm.
What was that?
Social Security.
Yeah.
I think it goes to the assumption that we were always going to grow our population.
Yeah.
And that's now not an assumption you can safely make. And so you're right, there are probably some good things about it. There'll be
Mhm.
more resources available,
Yeah.
but there's other bad things, which is
See.
your business is built on more people coming into my store. If there's going to be less people, you're going to have to rethink your business a little
Yeah.
bit.
Which is why there's tax incentives for families and children, right? So that's kind of like the theory behind that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially places where there was overpopulation.
Okay, I'm with you.
Even in Europe, you have governments actually paying and
That's
giving
true.
things like
Right.
France, Spain, like come
Russia.
on, have a baby.
Yeah.
We're gonna because
money.
they know that
Denmark, right?
nationhood, the problem.
Yeah.
Look at it, bring it very local. What if you wanted to buy a home and you were actually thinking about the value of your home, say, down the road? And if there's not much of a demand to buy, then the actual home ownership that you have may not appreciate to the level that you expect. And what kind of effect would that have with the school system, with the banks, getting a loan? It's not good or bad, it's just, hey, we need to be thinking about it, so we need to reset the assumption that somehow we're just gonna get bigger, stronger, faster, and so on. So some stats here, by 2013 it says about 60% of the world's population lived in countries with fertility rates below replacement rates. The impacts with the labor force, where wealth and purchasing power resides, the nature and types of services needed to meet the needs of the aging population, the impact on politics, with labor issues and so on. So it's something that's, I don't think any of us would have thought of or considered. I think we just took it as a given, as an assumption that it's not an issue. And the fourth one, we already hit that. The world is more connected through trade, through movements in capital, people, and information. What is your name? Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen said that. Did I get that right, Mary Ellen?
Mariella.
Mariella,
Yeah.
right. So thank you, Mary Ellen, for the fourth one. And they reference the word flows, the flows of people, information, and capital. The trade routes, flows of finance and capital centers, time to market, creating new opportunities, along with new volatility. So what does that mean? So for example, New York was always sort of this economic center. So was London. Now Dubai is. So is Frankfurt. Even Tel Aviv. And so specifically, these economic centers are making a big impact on where to do the center of commerce and activities. Getting on a plane in London and going to Amsterdam for the weekend for $60. I mean, the economics and the dynamics of that are phenomenal. It's a wonderful opportunity. A lot of fun to do that. I've certainly been benefited from things like that. I've never taken the Channel, but the whole idea of getting in a car and driving to mainland Europe and the commercial activity for that has opened up. There's a lot more trade routes. We're trading actually with many more countries, and many more countries are involved in trading among themselves or across the planet, whether it's through shipping, through plane, through whatever means, even information sharing and trading. So this flow that they use, this term flow, is one of these four forces that's impacting the world we live in. So again, as a consultant, this is the kind of world they want you to be thinking about, and anything you do should be in the context of these four forces. So far, so good? Yeah? Okay, beautiful. So that's this framework. Just sort of played with my PowerPoint and came up with this very dull schematic of this framework. All right, so each corner, there's no corner that's more important than the other, but this in essence is the framework we would play within. So everything is in the context of these four forces. All right. So now let's talk about some academic strategies. So who knows Porter's five forces? It's my favorite strategy theory, competitive strategy theory. Porter's five forces. There are five forces that this guy, Michael Porter, Harvard professor at the business school, came up with back in the 60s or 70s. Actually, he was very much responsible for even pioneering, making Harvard's business school as it is. He did this as a graduate student. Porter's five forces. It's actually a really an intellectually interesting game that or theory that he came up with, and then it's fun to think of different companies and the way they fit into these five forces. So, anyone have any idea or want to throw out any of the five that are here?
So the Porter five forces like the thought of a new entrant. The
Threat of new entrants. Okay.
And
Yeah.
firepower and threat of the substitution.
So wait a second. You said buying power.
Firepower.
Buyer's power. Yeah. The power of the buyer.
Yeah, and then power of supplier.
Power of the supplier.
And is the threat of the
Are you
substitution.
on Google?
Yeah,
You
he
just
is.
Google it?
Hey, he's doing it, that's,
Yes. That's why he's
Yeah,
in our
that's smart,
consideration.
that's why.
That's why he's in your class. The threat of substitutions
And then also one is a competitive rivalry.
rivalry, the degree of
Rivalry.
rivalry.
Yeah.
Right.
Competition.
Competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll go into this a little more. No, it's actually a lot of fun. So let's explore. Let's explore a little bit more. So Porter's five forces. So it's competitive strategy. It's really under the heading of competitive strategy. If you want to start a business, this is where you want to start with. Just even before you start writing your business plan. If you want to evaluate a company and wonder why your bill is going up, put it against Porter's five forces. Or going down, put it against Porter's five forces. If they're giving something away for free, Porter's five forces. If you see someone providing sales, you see hearing something going bankrupt, Porter's five forces. All right, so it's a very interesting model. So you mentioned power of supplier, power of the buyer, threat of substitute, threat of new entrants, and rivalry among competitors. So, what's the next slide? Oh, so let's just talk a little bit more about this. And I'm going to we're going to have a little bit of a game. I'm going to give you a name of a company or companies, and you let's think before we shout it out, but think like, okay, where would they kind of fit under? What would they represent? So, just for definitional purposes, the power of the supplier. This means that somebody who supplies something has undue bargaining power. And by having undue bargaining power means that basically the supplier is the one at the negotiating table that has the leverage. Because I have the upper hand, I'm the supplier. So, any ideas of any companies that make brands that come to mind on who has, go ahead.
I mean, airlines can do that better than hotels with, with setting prices and stuff in-house.
So let's look at airlines specifically. Airlines, okay. So are we talking about the airline manufacturer, or are we looking at the actual airline company transporting the people?
Delta.
Okay, so the airline transporting the people, okay. So before we go any further, there's something very interesting. Our federal government has something, and the Department of Labor has something called I think it's basically the MR ratio. The R is the ratio, so it's a monopolistic ratio. What they do is they look at companies and they say, how much market share does this company have? And they use that as a basis when you hear about companies wanting to buy other companies. And the federal government steps in and says, whoa, this company has only 6.7% of the market, will approve the acquisition. But if this company has 35 or 45% of control of the market, then we've got concerns here, we're not going to approve this deal. Because they want to maintain competition at the end of the day. So your example of the airlines, so let's talk about that for a little bit more. Let's go a little bit further. We're talking about Delta versus American Airlines. We're talking about JetBlue. We're talking about a startup airline. So let's talk about the airline industry in general.
Okay.
and we've got a new airline company called Mariella Airways that wants to enter in.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I mean, you should be able to do that. If you have enough capital, you should be able to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, part of your business plan is that you want to have the New York to Boston route.
Mhm.
Okay, now that's an incredibly competitive route in some respects because there's really only one airline that has that shuttle going back and forth. I think that's,
JetBlue.
and there's two. I was going to say Delta, and
Delta.
then JetBlue. You're right.
Okay.
new.
So why isn't like American and Spirit and all these XYZ other airlines also in that that market going to the shuttle back and forth from Boston to New York and New York to Boston?
That's not where, probably that's not where they are, where their customers or who they want to serve. They don't want to be that shuttle between certain,
But it's so lucrative.
is it?
Let's run the assumption that of the following. Let's just so we can round out this scenario. So you want to enter into that market, but you're facing enormous entrenched competition.
Okay.
Okay. So in some respects, the threat of new entrants into that market route is a potential risk for you to take on. Maybe you'd be better off because the ability to capture business would be probably in the form of lower cost, right? Selling lower cost tickets to win business from Delta and JetBlue. Problem is that there's a certain cost structure to run an airplane that
Right.
would require you to be at the same level as Delta and JetBlue.
Right.
So then the ability to compete with them would be pretty much locked up. So the power of the provider or the supplier of that service, Delta and JetBlue, probably have undue bargaining power, and the threat of new entrants would make your ability to get into that market very difficult.
Right. Unless I can find something that they're not supplying or giving at that moment. If I could find the customers, if I could do something that, you know, at the beginning I can start low and then pair up with them, you know, strategic way of
Yeah, lower cost strategy
I
to
think-
get into the market is always a possibility, but this is such a high cost, low margin business in many respects that it'd be very difficult for you to sustain that long term. So your investors would say that's not going to work. We'd have to find another, route to try to capitalize on where there's a lot of opportunity.
how does Southwest do it?
Great question. So Southwest controls more of their entire value chain, from the distribution of their seats and the selling of their seats to their strong marketing position, their loyalty program, to certain routes, and also their routes are very much direct. They're not hub and spoke, so you don't have to fly here to get to here.
Right.
They sell them directly. Another example is, what about, say, Apple computers? Apple. So Apple, in this particular case, what does Apple represent here? What does this Apple compare against?
Power of society.
I heard power of supplier. Is there another?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The store of a new
Third
entrant.
one, threat of substitute?
Yeah, it's really difficult to replace the Apple.
Yeah, so if I were building an iPad or an iPod knockoff, I would find it very difficult to get into it. But I think that Apple represents power of the supplier. They're the ones who can call the shots. They control the distribution.
Right.
They can go to Best Buy and say, you want to carry it? Best Buy will say, please, we need to make money here. Well, Apple could say, well, we may not even need you. We'll just sell direct or on our own Apple stores. So power of supplier is a good example. What about, say, the relationship with Disney and the movie theaters? Who has more influence there? Disney, the content creator. Everyone loves Frozen. Everyone loves all the library of different movies that we have. Maybe we'll make it available on cable and not rely on, or maybe we'll have it on the Disney Channel alone. So in other words, if I were a movie theater and I wanted to negotiate ticket prices with Disney, I might be at a disadvantage because Disney can go through other routes. So it's always morphing. There's no one correct answer or one way to describe it, but this is a fun exercise to go through when you're looking at industries and their market position and how competitive it is. Toothpaste. No, better yet, razors.
Yeah.
Razors. Now, I pay a bundle for 4 razors. Gillette. I buy these Gillette. I'm kind of sold on Gillette. But there's this guy who went on the web and did these viral marketing, which were brilliant. Shave Club for Men or something like that, and basically you subscribe and it costs like $10 a month, and you can get basically unlimited or a set of shave razors that would cost me far less than if I just went to Gillette. So there's an example where for a very long time without the internet, Gillette and Schick basically, and what was the other one? Remember the other one? The Sword guys? What were they called?
Oh yeah,
Wilkerson.
Wilkerson, right?
Wilkerson. These two, Wilkerson I don't think exists anymore. It's really come down to Schick and Gillette. And all of a sudden you get Harry's Shave Club. Then there's a German company. That might be Harry's. And then there's this guy, Shave Club for Men or something like that, where it's a subscription.
Dollar Shave Club.
Dollar Shave, that's what it is, Dollar Shave Club. It's like literally $1 to get these high-end products. So it's very interesting. So it's like Gillette, oh man, power of supplier, they own it. And the product is such that there's really no substitute unless I get an electric shaver. So if I were thinking of getting into the shaving business, which I'm sure these guys did, is they looked at it and said, okay, threats of substitute can be high because people are not going to be that loyal to their razor, or maybe they will. There's not a lot of competition. With enough capital I can get in, and
the margins are good.
And the margins are good, and the buyers are looking for. We also know from analysis that simply consumers are looking for a lower cost, equally efficient product. So it's a fun academic exercise to go through. If you're thinking about creating a business, first thing you want to do is, well, how competitive is it, and how strong is the competition, and how would I come in? Would I come in as a low cost provider? Would I come in as a volume, like give a lot of it away to hook them in? Would it be more of a subscription model? Would I use the web as a distribution channel? This is all sorts of games you want to play on.
By knowing the power of the buyer, definitely you want to use that online thing because you can actually reach out to people in ways that big companies have the money to do so, and you can't because you're somewhere in Costa Rica and you're doing certain little things, and somebody in Sweden will know that, hey, you have this particular thing that you can cater and market up to that particular.
But don't assume that the big guys will just stay still
Oh
either.
no, they'll try to buy me.
Yeah.
I know.
Buy you,
I'll give them a price.
or basically shut you up by outspending the marketing and building the brand and be like,
Oh yeah.
I'm just like the Gillette. I've been using it all my life, and they're everywhere, and they're sponsoring sports games, and they're.
But does that mean that anybody can come with a certain kind of change in providing certain kind of services to a market? The big guys automatically will take over what this new person or these new companies do. Is it?
I'm sure I follow what you're asking.
So how can I explain this? If the internet, if my ability to sell, if technology is allowing me now to provide and to be able to put my product out there in ways that if I was not a big company, somebody in another country would never know about me. So if all of a sudden I start to get markets or people following me, and they're like, oh my God, this little person in this place is doing this. Well, there comes, let's say, I don't know, what's for widows? Okay, there comes Lancome, and they realize that, my little moisturizer that I'm getting from the coconut somewhere next to where I live, they could duplicate it. Is it necessarily true that every little company or anything that doesn't have the big capital will eventually be taken by the big guys? Because yes, they're going to look at, the threats that are going on out there. But does that mean that eventually I will succumb to them?
Well, I think as if you're the owner of the business, you should think about your exit strategy. What do you want to do? You want to grow this for the next 60 years and become another, you mentioned like an Estee Lauder, 60, 80 years, or do you want to continue to grow the brand or be an acquisition, or maybe you'll get so much, your product will be so popular, have the capital to go and acquire others and build a
But this is the thing, I would not
line.
know. How would I know the future? Oh, I could do a planning where I can have my sunset years. But what if my sunset years don't even...
Right. So, this is a little bit of a philosophical discussion here.
Oh.
I think we do definitely take things to a different direction. But as a business person, you definitely need to think about, how strong is the competition and what's out there in the marketplace, and what's missing and how can I exploit it. And the beauty of like a company like WhatsApp was that, hey, you know what? In this whole wheel of communications, there's a slice that's missing right now. And I'm going to wedge myself in and I'm going to exploit it.
Right.
And this happens all the time with companies. And some companies are successful at it, some companies are not. I think the average entrepreneurial, it takes the third business to finally get it to work.
Wow.
So it's third business. So his first two have failed.
Awesome.
If you failed, that means you've succeeded in some respect because you've learned a lot from it and now you take it. If you ever watch Shark Tank, it was very interesting. In Shark Tank, the other day they had two young guys who had a technology and they were pitching it and it made sense and every one of them said, are you the programmers or are you just the marketers? And they said, yeah, we're just the CEO and the marketers. So you guys don't really control the programming, do you? And the answer was no. They should have had a programmer in that room to answer the technical questions. I assure you that whenever I go anywhere, I'm always head with my programmer. Because I don't want to answer those questions because the doctor should speak to the doctor. And these guys failed at that and they didn't get their money. Now, I think they still have an opportunity to do something interesting here, but I'm sure they've learned. Even if they fail at this business, the next business they start, they're going to bring their expert who is, is behind the code. So these are just lessons as an entrepreneur. So you had a question.
Well, I was going to say in the hospitality industry, one of the interesting kind of changing of forces is Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So Airbnb, in my review, would be a new entrant.
Will be a what?
New entrant.
New entrant. Threat of new entrant. So this is they represent an opportunity to break into the market with a business model that is very little competition. They're providing an alternative, and they're tapping into many different aspects of the traveler's mindset that they have basically wedged themselves into.
I was gonna say, would you say it's power supplier as well? Because like they're adding, 19,000 hotel rooms to the market.
For sure, the power supplier, but the product is different than
Then a widget.
The inventory is different than a hotel. A hotel experience. Now, for lower end hotels, you get closer to the Airbnb business model. But Airbnb would never say, stay with us rather than Ritz-Carlton. They would say, stay with us if you're looking for a hotel that's of comparable price in a certain location. Because the customer then is not looking for service, they're looking for experience. But that's a great segue into the one I wanted to talk about, which is, what do you think about a hotel and Expedia? So who has the bargaining power here? Is it the hotel, the actual owner of the inventory, the supplier? Or is it Expedia, this simply this online brand?
It's a hotel.
I hear a hotel and I hear
Yeah.
Expedia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Expedia should be an arm to help the hotel get rooms, but not necessarily set the price.
Yeah.
think it depends on their brand power and dependency on
Right.
the OTA channel. So let's say Ritz-Carlton, they don't need to sell out their rooms via Expedia. But if you're like independent hotel without specific brand and probably customer recognition is very low, then you must be very desperate for selling out rooms via Expedia and every single channel including packs, so there's no choice.
Okay. So I have an analogous scenario. I'll go back in history, give you a little context, and then we'll come back to this. So has anyone heard of a company called Coca-Cola?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Nope.
Pepsi.
It has
Coke,
stops
Pepsi.
in Pepsi, that's.
So, Professor Moshe, do you remember New Coke?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember New Coke? Okay. New Coke. New Coke was a different formulation to Coca-Cola. Came out in what, 80s?
Yeah.
80s?
Mid-80s.
And I think it was $2 billion investment. Coca-Cola was huge at the time. $2 billion marketing. And, boy, I wish I was at the marketing agency of that, right? So $2 billion, I think it was basically relaunching a product that the world has been drinking for 80 years, called Coca-Cola. So why would something so successful and such a global brand, some respects, try to walk away from it and launch a new product. So what was going on? And the question, the answer is not as obvious as you think, because just a formulation of a drink, is that all they're doing, is just trying to, like, what else is involved in the consumption of Coca-Cola?
You have a certain a segment where you have a,
So they're trying to get new customer, a different type of customer.
they're
to
kind of
join?
reinventing themselves like Madonna, you know what I mean? You have something, and now if you can say, okay, now this is us, and now we have this different drink, or we have this different thing
They're
to
they're
give.
trying to modernize their
And
product.
then you could acquire other markets
Yeah, yeah.
through the.
I mean, we hear it all the time, like, oh, we're geared toward the millennials. You know, everyone's geared toward the millennials. It gets a little tired after a while. And when last time I checked, they're not even working. So I was like, I'm joking, but I mean, it's like the millennials. Okay, so that's kind of like what's going on here. Like, this product is perfect for the millennials.
Yeah.
Any other theories as to why Coca-Cola tried to recalibrate its entire product, the core product?
There's no, honestly, there's no choice when it comes to its distribution channel. It's monopolized, so let's say like there are restaurants and vending machine, you don't have any other choice.
How did you know that? It's a very good answer. It was all